Welcome to The Other Side, Mississippi Today's political podcast. I'm Jeff Pender, joined today with my colleagues Taylor Vance.
Hey, Jeff.
Hey, Taylor, and Michael Goldberg. Michael.
Good morning, Jeff.
Good morning. Good to see y'all. We are, as we record this, right at about the 1 month left of the legislative session. I think we can see there's a tunnel at the end of the light.
Yeah.
Anyway, and coming into the home stretch, and had a really busy week this week. Killing of many bills transpired. In fact, we're at this point in a session, normally there would be a lot more alive and kicking, but as it worked out,
I think there's only about a handful of bills that have even made it to the governor's desk.
Right,
there's usually a lot more, but I think there's only one's been signed into law, and two or three I think are sitting on his desk.
It does
now.
appear to be trending that way. But one major thing, Michael, that we've seen this week or in recent weeks is, I guess, the death primarily of most of the school choice bills that have been proposed. Where do things stand there?
Yeah, so speaking of sort of killing bills, I think that lawmakers, that can occur, yet there is always a little bit of uncertainty about whether lawmakers will bring legislation back to life through inserting language in other bills. So we'll get into that because that took place this past week with one of the major school choice bills. But just to sort of give a bit of a recap, we've discussed it on this podcast. School choice is a concept that is intended, according to proponents, to give parents more autonomy to sort of customize their child's education. Opponents say that it undermines public schools, could lead to resegregation of public schools in a state where historically that's been an issue here in Mississippi. But leading up to the session, both Lieutenant Governor Delbert Hosemann and House Speaker Jason White have came out in favor of public-to-public transfers. This is an idea sometimes referred to as open enrollment, sometimes referred to as portability. So it appeared going into the session that would be the policy that was sort of the consensus school choice issue.
This is allowing students in a school over here that's not doing so well, they can switch to another school more easily than.
That's right. Under current law, the receiving school district, if a student wants to go from school district A to school district B, school district A has a little bit more of an ability to hold students back. They have to sort of consent to allow the student to make that transfer. The primary bill this session that would sort of ease that public school transfer process was sponsored by Representative Jansen Owen. It would allow some students to more easily transfer if there wasn't sort of a higher performing public school, I believe within 30 miles of their hometown. So that passed the House.
And correct me if I'm wrong, it like school district A couldn't deny you from going to school district B. School district B would still have to approve.
Right.
But school district A, as I think Speaker Jason White likes to say, they couldn't hold you hostage.
That's correct. The legislation that advanced a sticking point was including a capacity requirement, which means that school district B would have to sign off on the transfer, and they would have some leeway to deny transfers if they proved that they didn't have the capacity from a student population perspective to take in that new student. So it included a lot of other provisions as well. It was, a detailed proposal that got into sort of how the funding, how the public money would follow the student. It passed the House and made its way to the Senate. Senate Education Chairman Dennis DeBar was sort of clear right from the get-go that it was uncertain whether that bill had the votes in the Senate to advance, but he sort of said that the Senate would take up the House bill, and if consensus changed, they would move forward. This week, as the committee deadline approached, it became clear that that piece of legislation did not have the votes to advance. The Senate sort of ultimately chose to not take up that bill and let it die. What ended up happening later, Jason White was very displeased. And I think, correct me if I'm wrong, for one of the first times this session, he really called out the lieutenant governor by name.
Pretty strong
Pretty
wording.
strongly.
Lack of leadership,
Yeah.
I believe. Is,
Yeah, for a very educated term, he was ticked off.
He was quite
Yeah.
ticked off. I believe he said that Lieutenant Governor Hosemann was for the status quo on education, and that at some point the lieutenant governor would have to own up to the fact that he's for the status quo on an issue that's been championed by the Trump administration, et cetera. The lieutenant governor, in a statement to Mississippi Today, repeated that he was, in fact, in favor of portability, but just the votes weren't there in his caucus to advance that priority. So late in the afternoon, the House Education Committee ultimately inserted language from their portability open enrollment bill into a separate bill to kind of keep the conversation alive, and according to Representative Owen, give the lieutenant governor a chance to sort of honor his commitment to open
and whip the votes.
and whip the votes. I think there is uncertainty from a technical standpoint about whether that move could be challenged with a point of order and whether it's actually viable going forward. But so that's sort of where the conversation stands on open enrollment. The more sort of some would say divisive. I think there's less support for sending public money to private schools. Those initiatives had already died. So this sort of open enrollment school choice is really open enrollment bill is really one of the last pieces of school choice policy that we see still sort of alive this session.
Well, when we started this session, there was a major push from the school choice advocates, it would appear, like I said, driven in part from the new Trump administration, to do full-on vouchers, to spend public money with private schools, things of that nature. What is still alive as far as any school choice?
Mm-hmm. So there is some technical changes to the ESA program.
Education savings accounts.
Right. Those essentially were conceived as giving students with disabilities more leeway to sort of they do have the ability under that program to use their sort of public money that's used to fund their attendance in public schools and take that to a private school that they argue would kind of better serve their needs. But there are some sort of capacity requirements on that. There's been a push to remove the wait list on that. But there is a bill that makes some technical changes to the ESA program that could potentially be used as a vehicle to change it. So that is still alive right now. But there isn't much, for school choice. It really has emerged as one of the central sort of debates and priorities this session. And if you think back to where we were at the outset, it's really kind of a fraction of what could have been moving forward at this point.
Right. Well, and that brings us to Taylor. This point in the session, about a month left of a 3-month session. I would guess now the focus is going to shift now to the big issue when you're going into this, and that is tax cuts or tax elimination.
Our states, we're so rich and we're so fortunate that we can afford to cut all sorts of taxes this session, apparently.
Where does that stand? This is another issue that the House and Senate appear to be miles apart.
So basically what's happened is the House and the Senate have passed their own versions of a tax cut plan. The House's plan is a little more of a rigorous plan. It fully eliminates the state income tax over a period of time. It places a new, I believe it's a 5% sales tax.
We keep saying tax cuts and elimination, but each of these plans also include some
tax cuts. It's
hefty tax increases.
Tax increase, yeah. It's been really quite funny, even though I know both plans are a net tax reduction.
Yeah.
But it's also been pretty funny to step back and watch Republicans fight over raising taxes.
How much
too.
to
How
raise
much
taxes
taxes
on
we need to
gasoline.
raise. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's been a pretty fun debate to watch, and there was sort of a very funny moment, and I think I'm getting a little ahead of myself, but there was sort of a funny moment in the Senate when Democratic Senator Hob Bryan introduced his version, tried to amend it, his version of a tax cut that only cut some taxes and it didn't raise another type of tax, and his amendment was rejected. And Republican Senator Angela Hill came up to me afterwards. I think this is the only time where Hob Bryan and Angela Hill have really agreed on policy. And she said, I think it was very funny that Hob Bryan was leading the fight to not raise taxes. So it's been a very, very funny debate watching all that happen. But
well, these plans, when you look at the taxes they would cut, the taxes they would raise, would be, especially the House plan, a huge shift from progressive to
definitely more regressive. And I think the Republican leadership doesn't like to use that word. They
taxes that would
they're
hit poor
they're
people
use taxes.
harder than sure.
It is the more you buy, supposedly, the more taxes that you pay. But the other sort of side of that is that lower income people end up paying a larger share of their money,
larger part
of it on taxes. For example, if you take a person who makes $40,000 and a person who makes $100,000, if they're traveling, the same distance to work, they're going to pay the same amount in a gas tax. But the person who makes $40,000 is going to end up spending a larger share of their money on that. But I guess to get back to the plan, the House plan eliminates a tax, the state income tax. It puts a new tax on fuel. It
would increase the general sales tax.
Yes. Well, yes, it would increase the general 1.5. It would allow municipalities and counties to raise their local sales taxes, but it would also reduce the grocery tax. Now
this has been one thing trying to figure this out of the House plan. They would reduce the sales tax on groceries, but then allow local governments to add a 1.5% tax, local sales tax that would be added back to groceries included.
Yes, and so over time, I think it would be like a net reduction in the grocery tax, but initially, no, I mean, it would be an increase, and it would be a while, I think, before you see that fully implemented. But yes, so that's sort of it does a few other things. It puts, diverts more money into PERS and a few other things.
From the lottery.
Yeah,
right.
Taylor, one thing I wanted to ask you, when this legislation in the Senate passed through committee, I covered that. You've been the sort of tax policy guy. I've been the school choice guy of the session. You were conveniently absent when the bill passed through committee, so I had the pleasure of covering it. But, I noticed that Senator Bryan, in his very detailed remarks in committee, made the point from his perspective that the goal of this push to either reduce or eliminate the state income tax is sort of part of a more longstanding effort to, quoting Grover Norquist, shrink government to the size of shrink government to the point where it could be drained in a bathtub. Drowned in a bathtub.
Yes.
Thank you. I am not up to date on my,
Grover Norquist
quotes. But I wanted to ask you about kind of ideology versus pragmatism here, because you referenced there was some GOP opposition to this bill in the Senate, largely due to, I think, what could be characterized as more of an ideological opposition to raising taxes. So talk a little bit about kind of the degree to which this debate is being shaped by kind of pragmatic concerns over the budget, et cetera, versus sort of ideological concerns.
It's sort of weird because then you get into the different factions of the GOP, and you take really the House Republicans who think that if we just eliminate the income tax, then basically it's going to lead to just unprecedented amounts of economic growth in the state, and we're going to have so many young people who want to move back to Mississippi that we're going to see our Mississippi Renaissance, basically. And there's been some people who have questioned that philosophy, but I think basically from their standpoint, as long as it's a net reduction, then it is a conservative policy. It's still fiscally conservative. But there's been some in the Senate I would call the more conservative faction of the party, who sort of is a combination of two things. One, they just think that raising any type of tax is bad. It doesn't matter if it's a net reduction. Raising taxes is bad. But
that's the more conservative
wing. Yes. But that also more of just, there's sort of an offshoot of, well, maybe, we could raise some taxes, but I think raising the gas tax is bad because it's going to impact rural people and poor people who have to travel 30 minutes to go to work. They're going to face the brunt of it. And, sometimes, vote. Voters know what's going on, but that sometimes voters may not understand all the nuances of what goes on at the Capitol. And when they just go to the pumps and they pay more for gas, they're going to be irritated and just blame their local legislator for raising the gas tax. So that's sort of different. Does that answer your question? A little bit of the ideological battle going on.
And Michael, to your point, there's another faction, I guess you would say, and it includes, I think, the Senate leadership, who on the tax cut portion of this are saying, whoa, slow down, let's be careful here. That bubbled up in some debate this week on a transportation MDOT bill, in that we're in very uncertain economic times. I mean, we've heard Lieutenant Governor Hoseman talk about this since 2022.
We have tariffs being announced now. And Congress is blowing up the budget.
And I guess you would say let's be careful in what we cut and how we do it.
Especially because, Jeff, in Mississippi, we rely so much on federal dollars.
Sure.
And we're very dependent.
I believe it's 40% of our state budget is funded through federal dollars. So certainly looming over the debate, what will happen in Congress, these spending cuts that are being proposed, and what does that mean for the tax debate?
What does that mean? And are we in a place where we can erase $1 billion, $2 billion from our general fund when Congress is being pretty fast and loose with the budget right now?
Nevertheless, though, among those, the Senate leadership and quite a few folks over there talking about that, being extremely careful, they're still moving forward with a massive income tax cut. Cut on grocery tax. They're still moving forward with that.
There's a little simpler, a little more moderate cut, but it's slightly decreasing the income tax over 4 years, reducing the grocery tax immediately, and adding overall over a period of time a 9-cent increase in the gas tax.
To me, again, to your point, I think that is political more than pragmatic or whatever. I think maybe really and truly, if push came to shove, some of the Senate leadership that is urging caution might be okay with not having massive cuts.
Yeah.
But I think politically right now, the state economy has been doing well. State revenue for government has been at record levels. So I think politically they're hard pressed not to come up with some kind of cuts. Don't know if they would be fine with walking away without those, given the economic uncertainty. But it looks like there's going to be some kind of cut regardless.
Sure.
Although they're miles apart.
Yeah.
And the
Right.
three of us have been hearing all sorts of stuff, special session perhaps.
Yeah.
One side going home
Yeah.
without a budget.
Yeah, I
or,
mean, Jeff, you probably can speak to this a little more than I can. I mean, I remember this exact same thing happening in 2022 when we had then Speaker Philip Gunn and Lieutenant Governor Hoseman battling over the exact same thing. You know, Speaker Gunn and Ways and Means, or Ways to be Mean Chairman, as I call him, Trey Lamar, wanted to eliminate the income tax. Lieutenant Governor Hoseman said, no, you know, we need to do some modest cuts. They were having press conferences every other day, calling each other everything but a child of God and swapping tax cut plans. Then, you know, everybody was saying, oh, one side may go home early. We'll take Governor Reeves call a special session. I remember Governor Reeves sort of weirdly had this press conference where he said, you know, he still wanted an income tax elimination, but urged the two sides to work together. He said, you know, but we may have a special session. And then like the next week, the two chambers agreed on a tax cut, which is still being implemented, and the governor signed that into law.
Well, yeah,
So,
like you said, that things like that, brinksmanship happens nearly every session. You do hear that. We're hearing one side or the other is going to go home and not pass a budget and let the governor call them back, and we'll see.
Sure.
You know, yeah, 9 times out of 10 that doesn't come to pass.
no,
But 1 time out of 10,
it could.
it could happen.
I-
They have taken their ball and gone home and been
If-
forced back before.
If I were a betting man, and I've said this,
Don't do it online.
That's right.
Can't do
That's
it on-
illegal. We can't
Yeah.
do it yet. I would think that we will wait till about the end of the month, which is what we call conference weekend, which is when the budget bill sort of have to be finalized a little bit, and the revenue bills have to be finalized. I think the pressure, the person to watch will be Speaker White. The Senate will probably say, this is about as far as we can go, take it or leave it, and then it will be up to the Speaker to say, yep, I
Whether
can
he'll
agree to
take it
that,
or leave
or
it.
no, I don't, that's too small for me. We're not going to agree to that. And then I think the governor could call a special session after that point. But I think it would be pretty premature to just burn it down until that point.
Sure. Well, in this home stretch, finalizing whatever tax cuts or even setting a budget, it's going to be difficult, just
Sure.
mechanically, with what's going on in Washington, just the uncertainty. There are some major things being floated and enacted, then rescinded or whatever. But I mean,
Yeah.
if there's talk of a massive cut in the amount the federal government pays for Medicaid, I mean, that could
Medicaid,
That could
I
have
mean,
a
eliminating
humongous-
the Department of Education. Sure.
some major unknowns that I would think would make it difficult to set the state budget. So
and a little difficult to eliminate taxes.
Sure.
Right. And that unknown, to your point, has really been, I don't want to say a weapon, that's a little too strong of a term, but it's been sort of a justification that legislative leaders have used for sort of not advancing certain priorities, even
Sure.
ones that have been embraced by Donald Trump,
that
conservatives.
played into the school choice.
That's exactly right.
Let's wait and see what happens.
When we were, again, not portability, open enrollment, public public-to-public transfers, when we were still when the prospect of vouchers sending public money to private schools was still alive this session. When it ultimately died, that was used as a justification. We don't want to sort of mess up our education funding formula too much. We don't want to upend sort of our public education system at a time when the Trump administration has floated eliminating the Department of Education or really extensively changing the way public education is funded at the federal level. You saw that with Medicaid expansion this session as well. It wouldn't be prudent of us to move forward when we might see spending cuts or changes to the way Medicaid is funded. So what do you both make of the fact that you have a sort of Republican administration, one that legislative leaders supported, sort of being what they say is the obstacle to sort of moving forward on some of their own priorities?
It's as I mentioned, we saw that pop up in debate over another bill this week. It was quite interesting. It was a measure to give the Department of Transportation more autonomy to increase its contract with a contractor on a project from $100,000 to this is if you've already contracted a road project, but prices go up.
Right.
So they wanted to increase what MDOT could do on its own without renegotiating or rebidding from $100,000 to $250,000. That debate brought some questions of why are we doing this? And the answer on the floor from a Republican chairman was because of Trump and tariffs, and a length of guardrail may suddenly cost triple what it used to or whatever. And there was some debate on that, and it got into Trumponomics pretty quickly. So that's it's going to be interesting. Like I said, just the mechanics of setting a budget. I mean, much less having a crystal ball on what's coming. That's going to be interesting. This final month is going to be one for the books, regardless.
Sure
will be.
Anyway, and you guys will keep everybody informed.
We'll do our best.
We're not going to sleep much, but we will keep
probably not
our readers and listeners informed.
Okay. Well, anyway, thanks for the update, and we'll be back soon.